to a very interesting session with poet Faye George. Hi, how are you? Come on in. Okay. Faye George's poems have appeared in numerous distinguished publications, University Press periodicals, and anthologies. For instance, the Paris Review, Poetry and Poetries, 90th Year Retrospective, the Poetry Anthology, 1912 to 2002, the Anthology of Magazine Verse and Yearbook of American Poetry, Poetry Daily, and others. Her work has been profiled in the Boston Globe, the Providence Journal, and featured online with AGNI, the Cultural Society, the Endicott Journal of Mythic Arts, and Poetry Daily. She has received the Arizona Poetry Society's Memorial Award and the New England Poetry Club's Gretchen Warren Award and Erica Mumford Prize. Faye George has worked as a copywriter, public relations representative, and academic secretary. She is now retired and living in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. And let's give a warm welcome to Faye George.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you all for coming. It's really very significant for me to be in Fall River. I don't know the city of Fall River. What I know about the city of Fall River mostly is its history, as I learned it in my research for this book, Voices of King Philip's War. Do any of you, if I say the word Pocasset, does that mean anything? Pocasset.
In Tiverton, there's a Pocasset school. There were the Pocasset Indians. The school
Right.
was named after the Indians.
The Pocasset Indians were the Indians located in Fall River and across the Taunton River in Tiverton, Rhode Island. And there, at the time of Massasoit, their chief sachem was named Corbatant, C-O-R-B-A-T-A-N-T, or some of the English spelled it C-A-U. All of the Indian names were spelled phonetically. The Indian tribes here had no written language at the time of contact. A language was developed for them using actually John Eliot, when he came to this country as a minister, he took the Bible and translated it into the Massachusetts language using the phonetic sounds. Because, again, the Indian people here had no written language. The Delaware Indians in Pennsylvania, in that region, did have something in the way of a pictographic language, more like hieroglyphics. And so some of the other tribes did have something approximating an alphabet. But what we had here in our area were tribes that were related. They were all Algonquin-speaking tribes. So the languages that they spoke, all oral traditions, but they were related. They could communicate. The Massachusetts Indians could talk very comfortably with the Narragansetts or the Wampanoag people. The Pocassets were part of the Wampanoag language family, part of the Wampanoag community of Indian peoples. The tribes were roughly divided into, in this region, the Narragansetts in Rhode Island, and part of the geography changed once, of course, the English became established. But the Narragansetts were in Rhode Island. The Wampanoag people were more spread out in their territories as far as the Cape Cod and up close to Weymouth, the borders of where the Massachusetts tribes took over and then moved into the central region of the state. In the center of the state were the Nipmuc tribes. And the Nipmuc people were an assemblage of smaller tribes that were generally called Nipmuc country. The Nashaways, who were around Lancaster, the Quabogs, who were around Brookfield, and then you had the Wabauquossets, who kind of went down into the area of Connecticut. The Mohegans, who actually became allies of the English, the Mohegan people did not unite with the other tribes who finally did go to war. They stayed with the English. And of course, this is why you still have towns named Uncasville. Uncas was the Mohegan leader. And they had broken away from the Pequot Indians. The Pequots were in the area of what is now Mystic, Connecticut. And they broke away from them because Uncas, who was the son-in-law of the Pequot chief, Sassacus, decided that he wanted more power. And he joined the English in a war. In 1637, they destroyed the strength of the Pequots. They destroyed their village in Mystic, Connecticut, burned it to the ground, and the Pequots were one of the most powerful tribes in the region at the time, and they ended up being destroyed. Those who survived at all became absorbed by the Narragansetts and by the Mohegans. Well, coming back to the Pocasets, Coubertin had two daughters. One of them was Weetamoo. Some spell it with the single O, some spell it, most of the historians use the double O, Weetamoo versus Weetamoo. She was the elder daughter, and she became the sachem after her father. So she was leading her tribe. There were many female, strong female sachems, squaw sachems they were called. She was the squaw sachem of the Pocasset people, and she was related to King Philip, whose Indian name had been Metacomb, as she was actually his sister-in-law. She had been married to his elder brother, Wamsutta. Wamsutta became Alexander. They went to Plymouth and asked that the Plymouth court give them English names. This was after their father died. It was traditional for the Indian people to change their names when something significant happened in the course of their lives. So many of the Indians have many, many aliases, as there were life passages. Wamsutta died under mysterious circumstances shortly after he was taken into custody for questioning in, it would have been 1662. He had inherited the sachency from his father, Massasoit, and there were rumblings. The Indians were finally waking up to the fact that they were losing everything, that the English now outnumbered them 2-1. This all happened within 55 years, that the populations then, there were only about 1,000 of the Wampanoags left in this area. There were more Narragansetts, there were about 4,000 of them. The plague that had swept down the coast of Massachusetts had wiped out a good portion of the Massachusetts tribes, of the Wampanoags, and the Pennacook, Pawtucket Pennacook. Those were the people around Lowell. So the plague seemed to go down about as far as Rhode Island. And so the Narragansetts remained fairly strong in numbers, and the Pequots at the time also, until they were overthrown by Uncas. When Alexander started to show signs that maybe he was not going to be the good buddy that his father, Massasoit, had been, the second generation were now in power. Edward Winslow had been a very close friend of Massasoit's. His son now was in power, Josiah Winslow. And he was land hungry. What they were doing was not what William Bradford had understood the Pilgrims were supposed to be doing. They were supposed to have a tight-knit religious community. They were not supposed to be spreading themselves out, acquiring more of the Indian land. That was not what he had in mind at all, and he states this in his own journals. But he was powerless to control the expansionist movement. These people now saw land as profitable, something the Indians as such didn't think in terms of this kind of acquisition. They used the land, they valued the land, they took care of the land, but they never acquired it in terms of how much more they could make from it. And sadly, the English did. So I will begin reading from Alexander Wamsutta, who was the husband of Weetamoo, again, the squaw sachem of this region. As it was my father's, Massasoit's, wish that we should keep the peace between us and the English, and as it was our custom to mark a death or other solemn time by shedding one's old name to take another, at his passing, I, Wamsutta, with younger brother Metacomb, would ask that Plymouth bestow upon us English names, honoring our father's wish. Hence I would now be known as Alexander, my brother Philip, named for ancient kings, which flattered us as it was meant to do. But keep the peace? I fear it was by then too late for that. I do not fault my father so hard-pressed the bargain made to forge against the Narragansett thread an English shield. With Wampanoag numbers so diminished by the plague that swept our land like fire in autumn grass, our flesh its kindling, so many dead, the villagers had no one left to bury them. Their whited bones lay scattered over ground. Those who could fled. Crumbling Weetoos. Weetoo is the name, the appropriate name for the housing, the conically shaped houses that the Wampanoag people created. They were covered with skins, furs, saplings bent in an arc, and the skins and reed or rush mats placed over them. And Wampanoag, the word most familiar to us, is actually a corruption of the word Weetoo, W-E-T-U. Crumbling Weetoos, grinning skulls were left to greet the English, who found in our distress their lucky chance, much as the bird that lays its eggs in another bird's nest, unwitting host, whose own offspring will be displaced by the invaders. Caught between two wolves, my father thus allied himself with one against the other, believing English guns would help him keep the Narragansetts at a distance. Well, ultimately, the Indians, who sadly were always fighting among each other, learned too late to work together. And enough of them did not work together. If the Narragansetts had come in earlier in the war, that might have made a difference. Might. If the Mohawks had not turned on Philip but had joined him, that might have made a difference. If the Mohegans had not joined the English, that very likely could have helped a lot. Now, surely they would not have been able to hold out against the technology coming from Europe, the guns, the supply line that the English had. But they certainly could have gotten a better deal than they did, which was nothing. And what happened here, what began right in this area, would spread across the country. The treatment of the Native American was really mapped out right here. What would happen here would be repeated all across the land. And it's a tragic story. It is a story of genocide. There's no other way of looking at it. It is a story of genocide. And you know, this has been glossed over. I know when I went to school, I was never taught this. I can remember as a child, we learned every Thanksgiving, the art teacher would come and we would all draw a picture of the first Thanksgiving, and the Indians and the English and the Pilgrims were all getting along, and it was so lovely. As the next part of the history that I learned was about the Revolutionary War. What happened in between was never examined or even brought up. I am going to skip over now to Metacom, King Philip. He did not want to go to war. He took over it. When his brother died under mysterious circumstances, he was taken into custody for questioning. Do any of you know where the pond in Halifax, Monpont? Are you familiar with Monpont Pond in Halifax?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. Well, actually, there is a plaque on Route 58. White Island Road goes off to the right, and there is a plaque on a stone right at that corner, which commemorates. This was where Alexander had a camp, and they would often go there fishing. And so Josiah Winslow, who was sent by the governor, Governor Prince, Prince was the governor at the time, to bring him in for questioning. They wanted to know what was going on. They suspected that he was maybe thinking of some kind of a resistance movement, an uprising. And they had also told him they wanted him not to sell any land to anybody other than what the English approved. And I guess he had made some deals with somebody in Rhode Island, and they did not like this. So he was supposed to answer these accusations. He didn't show up, so they came after him. They were on their way to Rhode Island because, of course, the Wampanoag, the Pokanockets were part of the Federation, and their chief sachem was in charge largely of all of the different groups, the Pocasets, the Sakonets. The Sakonets were the people in Little Compton, Rhode Island, what is Little Compton now. And then there were the Nauset Indians from the Cape. But the Wampanoag Federation encompassed a fairly wide area. And, but they didn't, even a chief sachem did not have the kind of absolute power, say, that a king had, a European king. The English often misunderstood this. If a particular group decided they did not want to continue under allegiance to that sachem, they would just break away. They had the freedom to do that. They were in many ways far more democratic than we probably ever understood. Well, they came upon him at Monpont Pond. They were having breakfast. And their guns were all outside. The English took the guns, broke into the lodge, put a gun to Alexander's throat, and said, "You're coming with us. One false move and you're a dead man." So he didn't have much choice. He went with them. He had his people with him. His wife, Witamu, was with him. And it was a very hot day in July, and they got so far and decided that maybe the best thing would be to stop at Marshfield, don't go all the way to Plymouth. And Alexander was not apparently feeling very well. And there's a lot of confusion as to whether he had left and then come back, but in any event, shortly after this arrest, he became very, very ill, very sudden and very ill. So his people wanted to get him home, and they said, okay, he could come back another time. He died. He died on the way home. His brother, Philip, believed he was poisoned. His wife, Weetamu, believed he was poisoned. He may well have had an acute attack of appendicitis. Nobody knows. But what his people believed was what was important, and they believed he was poisoned. I don't know. It seems unlikely that the English would have gone that far. But in any event, he had been treated when he began to feel ill. The English called one of their own doctors who gave him some kind of preparation. But medical people today who have looked into this have speculated that even if it was well-meaning, whatever they gave him was probably the worst thing they could have done under the circumstances if he was having an attack of appendicitis. Well, so Philip now is the new sachem. He's about 24 years old, was not prepared to take on this responsibility, and knows very well that his people are very weak in comparison to the English. And he knows that he certainly couldn't take this on alone. He has to get the support of the Narragansetts and as many tribes as he can pull in. So his work is one of a traveling diplomat for quite some time, trying to get these tribes to join him. He had no luck with the Mohegans, and when he attempted to bring in the Mohawks, actually they turned on him and wiped out a good portion of his own people. He had gone to New York during the winter, that February, seeking support from some of the tribes, the Mohegans, who were a New York tribe. People often confuse the Mohegans with the Mohegans. The Mohegans were the Connecticut tribe under Uncas. The Mohegans were New York Indians, and they were next door to the Mohawks. The Mohawks turned on him, and there are a couple of some speculation as to whether or not Philip had done something deceitful himself and actually had some Mohawks killed in the hope that, to make it look as if the English had killed the Mohawks, in the hope that then they would get mad enough to join him and in his war. That's one story. But the other possibility, which seems far more likely, was that the governor of New York, Governor Andros, was afraid that the war was going to spread into New York, and he did not want it to happen. And so that he set the Mohawks on the Wampanoags to drive them out. So they suffered from that attack badly, and Philip himself was somewhat ill at the time. So they limped back over the Connecticut River into Nipmuc country and prosecuted the war from that point forward. But coming back, as I said, Philip was well aware that he was not in any condition to take them on right away after his brother died. And so the next 13 years were spent in trying to rally the tribes together. And he's ambivalent about this. He says, I am a bone in the teeth of two dogs. Submission, a war. They chew and chew until one of them must swallow me whole. With my brother's death, I, Philip Metacomb, the second son, must carry this long struggle on alone. As sachem now, with little time to mourn, I fear the turn of things to come. He speaks about, we took their beads and trinkets and were pleased to have these gifts, even as the English knew that we knew not what we gave up. For this they offered in exchange for land, coats, kettles, cloth, the iron hose. But most we wanted guns, and so we lost much of the skill our fathers had to hunt with bow and arrow. We grew more and more dependent trading with the English. The worst of them will feed our people rum, make fools of them. They despise us for it, use us ill, impose on us the laws that fine and punish should we scorn their stubborn will. They tell us now we must not hunt or fish on Sabbath day. And thus they sweep away our right of birth to live as Indians, proud and free as the master of all life has made us. And then he accounts what happened to him at Taunton. In 1671, 4 years before the war, the English come after him and tell him that they want him to turn over his guns, and he has to sign this document that they drew up, and there is a copy of it in the book. And it's the most insulting confession, in quotes, that you could imagine. And they tell him, basically, sign it. So it's either sign it then and buy more time, or confront them then and be destroyed. So he signs it. And he says, his people are so angry, some of them, some of the younger ones especially. The older people remembered what the English had done to the Pequots. And they are not in a hurry to take these people on. The young are, why do we send the young to war? Because they're much more ready to fight. So he says, never again such an insult as Plymouth put on me at Taunton. Never again humiliation, forced confession. Never again will I surrender my weapons to them. Never again give cause to one of my own to turn on me, calling out as he left for all to hear, white livid cur. Never again. The blade of that slur has stuck in my heart these 4 long years. The young bloods ready to attack at whim do not understand. First, we must plan this, and I fear I am losing them. Daily it gets worse, and we are not yet ready to act. With Plymouth pushing us past the limits of patience, how do I keep their respect as long as I hold them back? He speaks of how the English have multiplied like weeds among the corn. And he says, the weeds grow thick on Pokanoket land. So many weeds they must in time expand along the wind's long fingered reach. Everything is not enough for them. They want our land. They want us gone. And more. They want us never to have been. And as he says, we must gather together, end the quarreling that has divided us. One heart, one mind, one body in this cause, a great storm of us, a mighty warrior wind, the hurricane that sweeps the land, whose fierce power bends all unto its will. So must we gather all tribes together, lay our plan with care, stealth and cunning, the time, the place to strike that best will serve the promised end. But let us keep the peace, such as it is, till then. For now cool down the blood and hide the rage behind the eye. It will not do to light the fire before the wood is dry. He goes on to talk about his secretary, if you will, this scribe, John Sassamon. Sassamon was a Christian Indian. He had been educated at the Indian school at Harvard that John Eliot had founded. And sadly, he ends up really in a kind of a person between two worlds. He doesn't have a comfortable place as an Indian anymore, nor as a white man. And he was working, and he is back and forth between them. He would have a falling out with John Eliot, and then he'd run back to the Wampanoags. And then he'd do something to displease the Wampanoags, and he'd run back to John Eliot. So at this point, he is discovered to be spying on Philip and reporting Philip's actions to Josiah Winslow, who is now the governor. And he is accused of murdering Sassamon. And there are 3 Indians who are hanged for this, Philip's men, counselors to him. So this is an outright total challenge to Philip's authority. The Indians normally would be taking care of their own problems among themselves. For an Englishman to try an Indian for killing another Indian was unheard of. So this right away is saying, you are under our rule, and we're going to take over. John Sassamon is kind of a pathetic case because, as I said, he has lost his real identity. His body is discovered under the ice at Assawamsett Pond in Middleborough, what is now Lakeville. And following the discovery, it's only going to be a matter of weeks before the war breaks out. They hanged his men, and by June 24th, this all took place in the spring. By June 24th, the first attack on Swansea. And so they're at war. And before this, what Philip says is he had been summoned by the Massachusetts governor. And he says, the Massachusetts governor sends his man to summon me to sign another treaty. But this time, I answer, your governor is but a subject of King Charles. I shall not treat with him a subject. I treat of peace with the king, my brother, only. When he comes, I am ready. Let them know forthwith, here too there walks a man of worth, a man of office, sachem, king, Indian. These high English think to rule unchecked as masters here. Take all we have, all we are, our honor, our pride of spirit. It is clear, there can be no justice for the Indian without war. Knowing now the lay of the land, I will feed their lust with every rod of earth that I have left to trade for powder and guns, and ransom it back with the blood and bones of them. For myself, I, Philip, Metacomb, Pometacomant. Oh, listen, friend, before the English tongue shall speak the law to Indians, before the English hand shall rule me with a scratching pen, before the English foot shall grind my rights to Plymouth sand, hear me, I am determined not to live until I have no country. Nancy, what time is?
Probably noontime, but we should have some times for questions and so forth.
So is this about a good time to
Sure.
let it go? Okay. I have not read a great deal from the book because I think it's important for those who are not familiar to get some background. So I've tried to prepare, if you will, the situation that Philip was dealing with. And you don't just get that if I'm reading to you without a lot of lecture in between. So are there questions that...
This is in the 1700s?
Pardon me?
This is in the 1700s?
Yes, this was at, well, the 17th century, the 1600s. The war broke out in June of 1675, and Philip was killed in August 12th of 1676. Yeah, so it was really just a little more than a year. Yes?
All the monologues in there, are they written by others than yourself?
No, they were all mine. No, yeah, it's something that I had wanted to do for maybe 50 years. I knew it was going to be a huge undertaking. I'm a lyric poet. I'm not a narrative poet per se, and this was going to be narrative poetry. But so it's a whole different approach, and much more disciplined in its way. Certainly lyric poetry requires a lot of discipline, but when you know what you have to do in advance, with lyric poetry, the poem often leads you. And here, the story had to lead me. So you're being, directed. I didn't know how many voices I would be using. And I discovered as I began that in order for the story to follow the development of the war, that I would have to include some of the characters, the individuals, that normally I probably wouldn't have found them as dramatic. But for instance, there's a William Nahatton who he is called to testify about the murder of Sassamon. And so I did feel that he was necessary. I didn't want to have anyone speaking from the grave, So I wanted them all to be telling their story to the point of their death. So Philip tells the beginning, and then as the war is prosecuted, the others come in and tell what their roles were in that war. Canonchet is, he has to be one of your favorites because he's such a noble person. He was the Narragansett sachem. And this is a beautiful human being, a man of great pride and great integrity. And I found a couple of quotes that the English had recorded of his statements to them. And whenever there is an actual passage that I have found intact in history, spoken or allegedly spoken by one of the Indians, we don't know, because we didn't have their diaries. But if it's a quote given by the English, then I have put it in italics. And Canonchet, when he is approached, he has been giving sanctuary to the Wampanoags before he got into the war himself. And the English know this, and he's trying to keep neutral as long as possible himself. And so he tells them, no, I won't shelter any Wampanoags. Well, they know he's doing this. So he is approached by the authorities from Massachusetts and told that he must turn them over. And he says, finally, I will surrender no Wampanoag, not so much as the paring of a Wampanoag's nail. I mean, that is so eloquent. That is that's so poetic. Not so much as the paring of a Wampanoag's nail. You know, the hell with you. It was so beautiful. And then, when he is captured, and he is offered his life, if he will turn on Philip and let his warriors now join with the Mohegans and the English, and you know, just join them and you join us now, and we'll forgive you for the rest, and you'll have your life. He says, when they tell him, or, you know, you're going to die. Then he says, oh, I'm going to die? I like it well. Then I shall die before my heart is soft, or I have said anything unworthy of myself. Yeah, thank you. Wow. Thank you. That's it. Wow. You know, what a man. What character. Yeah. And why don't we know these people? You see, this is one of the things that when I realized, you know, I often say to groups when I speak, I could say to you, who is Geronimo? And you would have a good idea, wouldn't you? I could say, you know, who is Sitting Bull? We know about these people, the Plains Indians. We don't even know the people who lived all around us right here. And I thought this is terrible, because they are dramatic people. They are strong people. And they're weak people too. I mean, there were some who you know, they made the bargain they felt they had to make. And it was sad, because when you demoralize people as badly as they had been, yeah, everything breaks down. The character breaks down. And so, yes, they would be deserting. They would be turning on each other. Under desperate circumstances, different people will behave in different ways. And you can't just think of them as, you know, betrayers, or they were confused and desperate and did not know which way to turn, basically. And they had been horribly confused by Christianity. When you suddenly, all your belief system, what generations have been handed to you, a whole way of life, a whole system of a religious structure that's part of your DNA, for heaven's sakes. And then a group of people come along and start telling you you're a savage, you can't believe this, these gods, without any real knowledge of how they interpreted their nature religion. When you do that to a people, when you take away the core of who they are, you can't be surprised at what's going to happen. And a great tragedy. Yes?
Yeah. Could you speak a little more about, because you hinted at it, but it wasn't really attacked fully. Looking at the issues of nature and how the Native American populations thought about nature versus how the British thought about nature, and, you know, thinking about sustainability issues, right?
Okay. Well, once again, to reply that, I will read one little passage which I think does address that. Monaco was one of the Nipmuc Indians, and he was a Quabog, and he says, he says, the English puzzle why we do this, why we join with Philip when they so good to us, make us all these praying Indians, praying towns, Wamisit, Nada, Casanamisa. Make us all good Christian Indians that pray. Not think, not know their plan for Indian is kill his soul. Kill his soul and take his land, make him live by English law, no more Indian way. Worse than killing Indian is kill his soul. Make it so small, maybe it disappear down hole in ground. Indian soul that friends the grass, tree, river, blue thatched sky, whose cloud flowers send the thirsting earth her rain to fill the streams and green the corn. Indian soul is spirit garment spread north, east, southwest. It calls the deer, the bear, good animals, come give us meat, and brings in time the full fish moon to send the shad and salmon swimming fat and thick into our nets. Indian soul, it sends the dream that speaks our life path to us, that teaches us the spirit song we keep inside our heart to sing at death. I ask the Englishmen, can Christian God do that for us? Okay, so he here is addressing this issue of the connection between the soul, the earth. Canon Chet, in one of his monologues, also speaks about the earth as the giver of all, and how this is, you don't cut this up. You don't parcel out the earth this way. You use these gifts and you use them judiciously. Philip speaks to John Eliot when he says, he speaks of what the Indian schools have done, the English schools. Make dupes and fools of Indians. For John Eliot in his gospel, I care less than for a button. He learns our language not to learn our hearts, but to confuse, corrupt our thoughts, and turn us from the path Great Spirit has revealed to us, to know and wisely use the gifts of earth and learn her wisdom. John Eliot knows nothing but his book, deaf to the lessons of our songs, our prayers, the many-tongued voices of earth that speak to him who has it in his heart to listen to the whisper of the moss as to the cry of the wind, to sniff the air and breathe it in. The God of this. Thus has the Master of Life made Indians, made us his children. And it's, again, that immediate connection with the land, the earth, that all that comes out of the earth is a gift. A gift. The difference between what you are putting into this earth that you own. No, they saw this as what they were receiving from the bounty of nature. And you don't attack the giver. You don't do this to the earth mother. A whole different way of looking upon, I can take this land, I can cut it up into squares, and I can own it, and I can make money from it. And I can find more and more ways of profiting from it. That was not the, as a matter of fact, the idea of the potlatch, which the Northwest Coast Indians are known for, where they would have a big party and destroy as much as they could of their acquired wealth. And this was to demonstrate, I suppose, some interpret this as having a way of saying, look how powerful I am, look how great I am, I can afford to destroy all this wealth. Well, no, there's another way of interpreting this too. A contempt for material goods. The Narragansetts, I did read in, I can't remember what the source was now, but the Narragansetts were known to have done something similar. And it was not in a boastful way, but it was just to sort of, have you read Walden, Thoreau, when Thoreau decides that he has too many worldly goods, he's got 3 stones on the windowsill, and he gets rid of 2 of them, some no doubt attractive pieces of stone, of minerals that he picked up. And he felt, well, no, his house was going to be too cluttered. His life would be too cluttered. And there again, it's the idea of what do I really need? And doesn't earth provide it? The idea of profit. This was so alien to the Indian relationship to the earth, to the planet. And I mean, if these people were living today, the mining, blasting off mountaintops, burrowing into the earth, destroying the cleanliness of the water. Talk about sin. I mean, this would be just beyond their comprehension. Because all of this, the clean water, the clean air, these were gifts. Gifts. The Great Spirit gave this. And you appreciate it. You use what you need, only what you need. And you don't destroy its capacity to reproduce. They would move their fields. They didn't go to an agricultural college, but they knew that you could exhaust the land in one place. And so they moved. They moved from place to place as they needed to. They would let the land restore itself, as nature will do when we leave it alone. So.
Are there other questions or?
Yes.
Did you find any interesting facts about Princess Weedamo or any of the Lady Satcham?
I'm so sorry to have. I have 5 squaw sachems
Okay.
represented here. I'm so sorry. I got so much into background. I didn't. And yes, I did. If you've got a minute, I will read just the last part, which I have to admit, I cried writing this. She was ambivalent herself at first about joining Philip. She was his sister-in-law, and she actually she had 5 husbands. She had been married to Massachusetts sachem at one time, and he died. And then she married Alexander, and of course he was killed or died. And then she married somebody else in between. I can't remember. Then she married. His name is. Pardon me. Well, he was the last husband. No, Quinnapin. But no, she had married Peter Ninowit, or Peter Ninowit, I believe that's it. And he went with Philip. He went with the English. So she effectively divorced him, ended the relationship. And she was ambivalent, though, at the time herself. And she did not want to, I mean, they knew the situation.
Sure.
But Philip did persuade her that her responsibility was to join him. And most of her braves, Awashonks, the Sakonnet squaw sachem, who was close to Benjamin Church. He had moved to Little Compton. And she was probably going to remain neutral at best, but finally her people most of her warriors had left with Philip, so she just ended up going along. Church didn't get back in time. He was going to come back to see what her decision would be, but he got involved in another skirmish, and by that time most of her warriors had left with Philip, so she just followed on. So then after the terrible winter that they spent in Nipmuc country, she decides that that's a lost cause. She goes back to her territory, and church catches up with her there and says, look, if you will just come with us now. So they decide to do that. And this is what I mean about, the ambivalence. And of course, Philip was heartbroken. I don't know, I read somewhere that they were actually cousins, and they might well have been, I don't know. But yeah, it was very, very sad. So she, at the end, has been pursued. Quinnapin, she married Quinnapin. He was Canon Chet's cousin, and he was second in command. And there's a wonderful, if you want to read something delightful, Mary Rowlandson's narrative. Mary Rowlandson was taken captive. She was the wife of the minister of Lancaster, the Reverend Rowlandson. And she was taken captive during a raid, and she was sold to Quinnapin from the Narragansett who had captured her. And he took her to be a servant to Weetamoo, who was then his wife. And actually, she was his third wife. He had 2 other wives at the time. So, but anyway, that's all in the narrative. But so she is at the Taunton River now. She's pursued by the English, and she's just knows there's no way forward. She has either found or lashed together some sticks for a raft, and I have not strength nor spark of life in me, no wish for aught but rest. Let it end now, here where I am. Let it be done. The sticks of my poor raft break up, drift off. Oh, let me drown. I have no wish to swim, to struggle on. Great river, Titicut, which was the Indian name for the Taunton River. Take my tears and wash all sorrow from them. Take my breath and give it to the trees that stand with arms upraised and waiting. Take my spirit and carry it to that good land beyond. And when they come with barking dogs and guns to take me in, when they find Weetamoo, she'll be at rest in your soft womb. The waters sun-warmed, open to me like my mother's arms, when she would lift and comfort me from some small childhood hurt. Oh, Titicut, you have ever been to us the truest friend, who gave us fish and brought the water birds, carried our canoes from place to place. Times we danced and feasted here along the shore, built our fires and watched the moon watch us till it grew white. O moon, O sun, will you remember us, the people of first light? Wampanoag translates to that, the people of the eastern shore, or of the first light. So.
Can you buy your book online?
Yes, yes you can. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or from the publisher, Word Tech Editions. So again, thank you so much for coming and for being so attentive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Faye. Faye has some of the copies of her book here if people are interested in taking a look at them or buying them. I also want to thank Betsy French very much. This is the chair of the English department.
Oh, thank you so much.
And,
I didn't do anything.
well, but she supported the effort, so we certainly appreciate it.
Great.
So thank you very much, Betsy.
Oh.
And thank